right now NATO has approved, so to say, that there is a membership aspiration in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well as in Georgia and in Ukraine. So it is possible that the alliance will continue to grow in the coming years. We have other states that have become members recently, such as Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro. So the last couple of years have really seen NATO growing.
And most notably, most recently, Finland.
Oh yes, of course.
And with the possibility, fingers crossed, of Sweden as well, which of course marks a tremendous change in Swedish policy.
Absolutely. More than 200 years of peace and non-alignment, ever since losing Finland in the War of 1812. Sweden has, probably together with Switzerland, being the most famous example of a state that is military non-aligned or neutral. However, after the full-scale Russian invasion in 2022, they realized that this was an untenable position and that the collective security offered by NATO was the only path forward. It certainly looks, at least after the Turkish elections now in May, that Erdogan is softening up to the prospect of Sweden joining. So I do believe that this is a question of a couple of months, and later this year, at some point, Sweden should become the 32nd member state of NATO. When we look at how NATO has evolved in recent years, it is worth mentioning that the first and only time so far that NATO Article 5, the famous article which calls for collective defense in case of an attack, was invoked in 2001 after the September 11th attack. And later on it led to the ISAF operation in Afghanistan. Later, NATO has been involved also in other actions, such as providing air support in the Libyan civil war of 2011. Also, they have been involved in this coalition of the willing, providing air support mainly, but there were some cases of special operations forces being on the ground as well in Syria during the civil war. Naturally also during the Kosovo crisis of 1999. However, none of those entailed any Article 5, those were more coalition of the willing, so to say, that used some NATO structures to facilitate their operations. However, there were not official NATO operations. And then in 2014, we had this the next large shakeup with the invasion of Crimea by Russia, the annexation of Crimea. And this is when alarm bells finally started to ring. At the annual NATO summit in 2014, it took place in Wales. It was decided that member states would have to increase their military spending to 2%. Those who were below 2% were given 10 years to reach the target of 2%, meaning that now next year in 2024, all NATO member states should have reached 2%. Right now it looks like 13 or 14 countries in the alliance are on target.
What's interesting is how you calculate what constitutes expenditure for the purpose of this, which is a bit of a trick in some cases. Because Germany famously was way behind everybody else.
And still are.
And still are, yes. And what I find remarkable is, despite the war in Ukraine and despite the vast amounts of material which has been provided by NATO countries to Ukraine, there is still a reluctance or an inability to ramp up production of those same weapons to replenish the stocks of the NATO countries supplying them. And still, and I always hark on about the British, because but this remarkable decision of the British Armed Forces, well, it's the idiots at the Ministry of Defence, who, retiring our fleet of 14 Hercules C-130 transporters. Now, other countries like France and Germany, which, as does the United Kingdom, have the Airbus A400M transporters, also run the Hercules because the Hercules can do slightly different things. And it just seems short-sighted when there is a war in Europe to be actually getting rid of any capacity. Still reducing troop numbers. I mean, it just beggars belief.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, especially when it comes to production, the decision should have been taken, to be honest, even as there was just a Russian military buildup around Ukraine's borders in late 2013, but the last moment that it should have happened should have been February 24th with the full-scale invasion. Instead, more than a year and a half has passed, and still the decision has not really been taken. There is a lack of propellants, for example, of various explosive materials that are needed in all types of weapons, especially in the artillery shells that we are running so low on. And there seems not to be any real effort to comb through the world, so to say, in search of these materials, the raw materials needed, then to assembly production to create these specific explosive mixes, so to say, on European Union territory, and then finally, in the final stage, to simply assemble the weapons and the artillery shells that are needed.
Adam, I'm going to have to ask you to pause there. As usual, we've run out of time, but we'll pick it up next time. There we are. I've interrupted Adam almost in mid-sentence, but fear not, if you join us next time, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story. In the meantime, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you next time on Poland Daily History.